for many teachers and educators, their knowledge of African American literature
Oh, okay.
starts with someone like perhaps maybe a Dunbar if we're lucky,
Hmm.
but certainly a Langston Hughes
Yeah, Langston Hughes.
and Richard Wright, James Baldwin. So
Hmm.
these are individuals that they are aware of.
Hmm.
Many of the earlier writers, they're not as aware of those writers.
Hmm.
And I say rather that it's one of the problems with our educational system that,
Limited.
yeah, that
Hmm.
many educators, even in the area of literature itself, have not had those courses that focused on African American writers prior to.
I was so amazed when I had taken the course in African American short story, African American literature. I mean, there were many people coming, I guess, coming down to modern days. Martin Luther King. He was more than just an orator.
Oh yeah,
I
yes,
found out that this man had written whole bodies of literature,
right,
sermons that we had never heard.
yeah.
I mean, I was just really amazed. I'm like, where was this material before?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I continue to tell my students that probably one of the most important essays of the 20th century is the letter from
From the
the
Birmingham
Birmingham
jail.
jail.
I knew you was going to say
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
I think
I
it
had to
is.
study
I
that.
mean, his reference, his knowledge of biblical
Yeah.
information, his
Hmm.
knowledge of the classics, his
Hmm.
knowledge of philosophy, his
Hmm.
knowledge of law that
Yeah, I
is,
understood it. The way
yeah,
he put things together.
right, is just amazing, and you can tell
Hmm.
that here is someone who, from a very early age,
Hmm.
received a great deal of information, a lot of reading
Hmm.
in any number of disciplines, which certainly made him the individual, the great individual
That he
that he
was.
was.
But we don't know that side of him.
Yeah, we don't hear much
That side of
about
him.
that side of him unless
Hmm.
we do the reading that he
Yeah.
did.
So when I actually read some of the other material that Dr. King had written, I was amazed.
Yeah,
All I knew was, I mean, at the time, all I knew was I have a dream, you know,
right,
and
right.
that's what they gave us.
Yeah,
The other thing is that they gave us that in 1968. Well, that was done in '64.
right.
But I mean, what he talked about in '68, they never talk
I
about
know,
that.
I know.
It's-
Well,
Well, it's only been in the last 25 or 30 years that there's been a real opening up of college curricula where you have Black Studies programs where students came in and they saw what was there, and what was there was not enough, and so they wanted to see classes that reflected their literature, their experience, not just Black or African American students, but many minority students. The whole perspective prior to that was totally whitewashed, if you will, and for those of us who went to school in the 70s, when we came in, there was nothing there to reflect us, and we had to agitate
to get
those classes. And the literature is literature, you know, and you need to be exposed to all of it,
Yes.
because there's a lot that you need the different voices. You need the different voices to get a true perspective of what's going on in the world.
That's very interesting that you say that, because I had a young lady on some weeks ago, and she was Asian, but her specialty was Malcolm X.
uh-huh.
I mean, when she came to me, I'm like, Malcolm X? I'm like, what does the Asian student know about Malcolm X? I was surprised. You know, she knew all about Malcolm and his philosophies, his theories. I mean, her poetry, everything centered around her really just studying his material and studying his philosophies, everything about him.
Yeah, I'm finding, and I suspect the same is true here, I'm finding in my African American literature courses that I'm getting more other race students, Asian students, white students, white male students.
Are you surprised?
No, because I think with the emphasis on diversity and people making the kind of projections that they've made about the workplace, that by the year 2000 we're going to see a more diverse workplace, that I think these students are getting themselves prepared
For that coming.
to deal with the kind of people across the board that they're going to see on their jobs, they're going to work with, they're going to get some understanding of them, and so forth. And I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, and you just get that different perspective. I mean, a college education is about learning, about opening up your eyes and your mind to different things that are going on. In one of my classes, we do some of the works of Amy Tan, and there's a section in, I believe it's The Kitchen God's Wife, where which is set during World War II in China, which is something that you don't get a lot of. You don't get a lot of exposure to that. And there's a passage in the book which can be kind of perplexing when you first read it, and for that reason it's fascinating, and students always remember it. And that is where one of the women, these are our Air Force wives, their husbands in the Chinese Air Force. One of the women mixes together this concoction of raw eggs and rice, and she's painting it on the floors and on the walls, and her companion, who had not had any experience like that prior, another Chinese female, thought she was crazy, and a lot of people in the village thought she was crazy, but what they found was that in China during that period of time, there were dirt floors and walls, flimsy walls, and what happened was when that concoction dried, it was just like porcelain. So it's great to be exposed to all these things. I don't know if we'd ever get a chance to use that here, but just to see that, you know, the ingenuity, the difference in perspective is just, it's eye-opening, and it's something that I think is good for all of us, because we get a chance to see that the way we see things is not the only way that it can be done, and there are other ways to look at, to view things, and it opens up the mind. It makes you more progressive, I think.
That's the beauty of literature too, because it can take you places that you've never been before.
Exactly.
I mean, a book, when you think about a book, you open a book, it's like wings.
Yeah.
The two sides of the book, I mean, and you're reading in the middle, it's like wings, and it take you to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
But you have to be open, and to when you have an open book, so that you can, it can take you there.
Yeah. My students are always surprised when I share with them that how I really became hooked on reading was around the age of eight or nine, and it was Louisa May Alcott. I mean, here we're talking about a white female during the 1800s, and I mean, I read everything that I could get my hands on. As a matter of fact, I really got really frustrated one day in the library because I'd read Little Men and Little Women, Jack and Jill, Under the Lilac Tree. I read
Three Little
all
Pigs.
of right? No, really. I read all these books by Louisa May Alcott, and I had the last novel that I was trying to read. They didn't have it in the library, and I was just so disappointed about that. And getting back to what you're saying, that reading, and this is something that Maya Angelou shared when she was here in the county. At the very end of her book signing, she gathered all the booksellers in the Borders Books in Bowie, and she thanked them.
Oh, that's good.
She thanked them for selling books. She said, because books transform our lives.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying. The wings,
It's
that's right,
transformation.
transforming for us. And reading Louisa May Alcott was for me. I mean, as other young people were doing whatever they were doing, I was having teas with my sisters. I have 5 sisters. And as a matter
That's
of
what
fact,
pulled you in.
Yeah.
What pulled me in, I think, was probably Claude Brown's Man-Child in the Promised Land when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I mean, this book, man. I mean, the first couple of pages, I mean, I don't know, he's just a bad little kid. Well, maybe that's not the way to put it, but that's the way it seemed to me when I was reading. I mean, he's just, well, his environment. I mean, he was just everything. I mean, it's a wonderful book to start with.
Yeah.
Because I wanted action, you know, I wanted stuff to happen.
Right.
I didn't want to get halfway through the book before something really happened.
Yeah.
He grabbed you.
I was going to say, you would not have been very interested in Louisa May Alcott at all. No, because I'm sure a lot of the events of the story, you would say, nothing is happening in this book.
I wasn't that patient to sit and wait. But Richard Wright grabbed me too.
Right.
And I read everything about
And you
Richard
know,
Wright.
it's interesting because, you know, we have Nathan McCall in the county.
Yes.
And I just saw a book signing that he did. It couldn't have been more than a
His
month
new
ago.
book,
Yes.
What's Going On?
What's Going On?
Yeah.
At,
he loved Marvin Gaye.
that's right, at Caribou. And I tell my students, those are the three writers that I use. I
He's
say
good.
that Richard Wright, Claude Brown, and Nathan McCall gives us insight into the black male psyche in this country.
I was,
And if we read those, and if we truly understand what these writers are telling us, that we begin to understand the plight of the African American male in this society.
yeah, because Nathan McCall kind of takes you there. I mean, when I read his book, I was just amazed. You know, we had him on.
Yeah.
Well, it was when we had him on, it was like we knew each other for years.
Right.
I just met him a half an hour before we did the show, and it was wonderful. But I was going to say, is there a correlation, say, between maybe Nathan McCall and a Richard Wright and a James Baldwin?
I think I see it clearly between a Nathan McCall and a Richard Wright. I mean, the section of Makes Me Wanna Holler
Yeah.
that I tend to read and have my students read again and again is the section when he's in prison. He's already done the armed robbery thing, and he's in prison, and he decides that maybe the library job is something that he can do. And as he's dealing with
Malcolm.
these books, when he's dealing with these books, he sees this one book, and on the front of the cover is a black boy. And that's how he's introduced to Native Son.
Oh.
And so it is from Nathan
remember that.
McCall's reading of Richard Wright. And what he states in that novel, Nathan McCall does, is that from that experience, he begins to see that there were books written by writers that really spoke, going back to your voice, spoke to that voice inside of him, that experience that he was having in his community and so forth. But the question I ask my students, and a question for us to think about, is why is it that a black male has to go to prison
Right, in order to find himself.
Yes, in order to become acquainted with a Richard Wright?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
isn't our schools doing that would allow that young man, that young Nathan McCall, to have had Richard Wright?
Well, if you
Right,
look at the
before he
history,
got there.
the things really haven't changed that much. I mean, racism, oppression still exists.
Right.
For some reason, the young black males are becoming disinterested in school by third grade. The overall environment is still very much oppressive, and so we need that voice. I mean, if that voice were not there, if the voice of the black female writers were not there, we would think that everything was fine and that there were no problems, that there was no other view. But yeah, I think there's a correlation between those writers, and I think the correlation is that, and you mentioned, why does it take jail for people to find themselves, or some stultifying experience for them to find themselves? Who knows why, but fortunately they do. Hopefully we will one day get to the point where it doesn't take something as terrible as jail or
Malcolm X, perfect example.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the same
same
kind of
thing.
experience.
Same kind of
That's right.
experience,
To get hooked on learning in jail, and
I've met a young man who was an artist, beautiful artwork, and he was in prison, and he said he did all of this beautiful stuff when he was in prison, but when he got out, he didn't really stick with it. But if you saw his work, I'm like, his work is just magnificent. And I mean, that's really sad. That makes me feel really sad. I mean, I want to be able to reach him. Say, well, I mean, if you could do this behind bars, you can do this every day and make a living.
yeah.
probably the discipline, the confinement.
Yeah.
There's nothing much else that you can do other than if you want to be on a positive, look at it from a positive standpoint, there's nothing much you can do other than to try to improve yourself and maybe try to begin to understand what brought you to that point, and begin to hopefully understand what can take you past that point. What maybe can help, what are some things you can do maybe in that environment that can help you transcend that, the finality of it, because in many cases people are there for long times, and why he wasn't able in this instance to
do the same thing outside.
do that outside. I think that if, if you look at the Terrence Johnson situation,
Yeah.
it seems like he couldn't really control everything that he had to deal with when he got out, and maybe that was as a result of having been in prison for so long, from such a young age, that he didn't develop the social skills and to be able to act independently in a positive way.
Maybe he felt out of place.
He probably did feel out of place. I mean, I believe he went in when he was about 16 or 17 years old, and was in there for at least 15, maybe 20 years. I'm not sure exactly how long he was in there, but a very long time. And when he got out, he tried to do some positive things to continue that positive turnaround, but then life happened, and who knows what kind of influences were around him to make him, unfortunately, end up as he did.
So this is the same thing. All of this is connected.
Yeah, I think that that's the important piece. I think there's so many distractions. I think there's so many things that pull on us on a day-to-day basis that we really do need to sit down, be quiet, and listen. Listen to that voice, you know, within us. And I think you're correct. I think oftentimes in a confined situation such as prison, people do, in fact, do that. They listen to that voice within. They find that creative niche. They find that voice
Could you have
within
time
themselves.
to do that?
Yeah. And we do it in a kind of abbreviated way. I've now made a part of my experiences on a year-to-year basis to try to do a retreat, at least for one weekend, you know, just get away from everything. I mean, the TV,
have some quiet time.
the CD, the radio, you know, everything, just to listen to that voice within. So I think that's part of it. But the other part that I was emphasizing is the education part.
Yes.
That I think that everybody wants to see themselves positively as a contributor to humankind.
Well, yes, because no kid grows up. I mean, little kid crawling around on the floor. No kid, you ask them what they want to be when they grow up. No kid said, well, I don't grow up to be a criminal, you know, something. He said, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a lawyer. No child says that. I mean, it's just something when you think about it.
Yeah. And I think when you have those images or those role models in front of you of people like yourself who have gone on to become writers, to become teachers, to become lawyers and doctors,
well,
to be whatever, then I think it's easier for a child to see themselves becoming that. And I think that's what we find with the example I gave of someone like a Nathan McCollough. He's saying to himself that, oh, Richard Wright had a voice, and he was dealing with some of the same things that I was dealing with. Well, really, to tell you the truth, even more so. I always talk about Richard Wright in terms of dealing with abject poverty. I mean, the kind of poverty that Richard Wright had to deal with. I mean,
he talked about a black boy.
Yeah, most of us don't even know what that kind of poverty is, and certainly Nathan McCollough was not brought up under those kinds of conditions.
But also his anger and his hunger. Richard Wright talked about in Black Boy also. And it wasn't just his physical hunger, but there was physical hunger too. But I think he was talking about psychological, the growth there. When he talks about his hunger all the time, he talks about being hungry.
Well, when you think about the overwhelming oppressiveness of racism at that time, and to a certain extent even now, the irrationality of it, there's no rhyme or reason other than just based on color, you do get angry. You do get angry, and there's still a certain amount of that anger around even today. It doesn't go away because the things that cause people of color to lose out have not gone away.
Have not changed.
Things have not changed that much. I mean, on a superficial level, you probably see more black people, more minority people, so forth and so on, but the powers that be, the control, whoever is in control, has not really changed. That power structure hasn't changed. And so the effects are still there.
Conditions haven't changed. You know, when we think about Richard Wright, Dr. Brown, also, when you think about his grandmother and his upbringing, I think he was a child who wanted to know. He was very curious. I mean, we thought of him as, you know, he burned the house down. We thought of him as being bad, but I think he wanted to know as a young
But
person.
don't you think all children want to know?
Yeah, he was no. That's my point exactly.
Yeah.
He was no different from any other kid.
Right.
He was curious.
And so the question becomes one of how do we as adults respond to their wanting to know and their wanting to be the best? Because I think you're right. Children want to be the best that they can be.
They want to be.
And so it becomes one of how are we as adults, wherever we are, whether we're in front of that classroom, we're in the grocery store, we're in the pulpit, wherever we come in contact with young people, what is our response to their wanting to know and they're trying to be the best that they can be? And, you know, when you deal with someone like a Malcolm X, who was discouraged from becoming an attorney through the school system, then you begin to see what could be a negative reaction to young people when the adults that they're meeting in whatever arena that they're meeting is not encouraging, not lifting them up, not helping them with that vision that they have.
I think that brings me to another point. Also, when I look at the young people and the reflection and the music that they listen to, the hip hop. You know, I saw an interesting thing some time ago on 60 Minutes. There were Japanese kids, teenagers, that were rapping in their own language to American music, American beats. And I was just thinking to myself, maybe there's a close correlation between young people around the world, you know, on the globe. Something that maybe they're rebelling against something. You know, a lot of times it's rebellion for whatever reason, you know. Well, I mean, I guess as a teenager, I rebelled against certain things too. So, but I see that in the music is really what I'm saying. Do you see that same thing?
Well, I think music is universal.
Yes.
You know, literature is universal. Rap, we're talking about nothing more there than poetry.
Poetry set the music.
That's right.
I'm glad you said that.
That's right. We're talking about poetry. And most young people that I know, you know, they know that beat.
Yeah.
They understand the rhythm and rhyme of poetry, and they enjoy it. So it doesn't surprise me that we have Asian rappers and Hispanic rappers.
Yeah, that's true.
And everyone, but this is not new either. You know, when you take
a lot of times they think it's new.
I know, but you take something like one of the films that I show my students is the evolution of a song, a spiritual like "We Shall Overcome."
Yes.
And
it's not new.
how that's being sung in or has been sung in so many different countries. We talk about Eastern Europe, and the walls come tumbling down. They were singing "We Shall Overcome." You know, in the video I have the Asians, Tiananmen Square, they're singing "We Shall Overcome." Really? Yeah.
Surprise.
So that song that started during slavery time, you know, during slavery times, in these not even structures, but in black churches that were held out in the woods and in camp areas, has become a song, a theme song for people who are trying to overcome oppression and trying to obtain freedom throughout the world. And it has no ethnic designation, and it has no gender designation. Wherever people are striving for freedom, they will sing that song. And I suspect it will continue.
I can appreciate what you're saying because I remember studying in the English class that Winston Churchill of England used a poem by, I think it was County Cullum. I'm trying to think of the name.
Probably If We Must...
If We Must Die.
Well, that's Claude McKay.
Claude McKay, I'm sorry.
Maybe it was...
No, it was Claude McKay.
It was Claude McKay, If We Must Die.
Talk about the pack.
Yeah.
He used that in one of his speeches during the time.
That's right.
And reading that, I just found that to be amazing. And I was thinking to myself at the time, because I'm a teenager, I'm like, what does he know about that? You know, what does he know about Claude McKay?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. This,
So-
this poem, it was written in 1919. It's probably one of the few literary works that was actually read into the congressional record.
Okay.
And it was read in the congressional record because there was an anti-lynching bill.
Oh, at that time.
And so the fear was that if we don't do something about the lynchings that are occurring in this country, and it was estimated that about 2 to 3 of them were occurring a week, that we may have a race war in the United States. And so it was actually read into the congressional record as support for an anti-lynching bill.
Thank you both for coming and sharing with us today on Color Me Poetry. We're looking forward to having you back, to come back and share with us again. We've been talking with Dr. McCollough and Dr. Mary Brown from PG Community College, and we're certainly looking forward to having you come back and talk about all the things that's happening in literature and in publishing as well. I'm Danny Queen. This is Color Me Poetry. And until next time, Color Me Poetry. Thank you.